They actually had a cover story once that said, Hindus are cannibals. Tampa Bay, Florida supporters said, how can they write this article? We identified a textbook that basically said that other religions treat women with respect and they don't have anything more written. But for Hinduism, they said Hindus consider women inferior.
It's difficult to talk about is a topic called swastika.
The symbol that we identify with hate, violence, the Holocaust is a misappropriated symbol that was flipped around and rotated by the Nazi regime and then incorrectly called the swastika, whereas the Nazi party called it the Hakenkreuz, but it's actually not the swastika. And that's why Hindus and Jews don't threaten each other. We're not trying to convert each other or kill each other.
We first established that you are related to Mahatma Gandhi. What is happening?
Family is very important to our communities anywhere in the world, but particularly in India and Israel. But that community is very hard to build in America. America is still a very individualistic society.
This Hindu-Indian American man is related to Mahatma Gandhi and is building an alliance between Hindus and Jews. Namaskar, Shalom, and welcome. My name is Ravital Moses, aka Moses in Israel, your favorite Indian Jew, born and raised in India and now living in Israel. And my goal is to bridge India and Israel, one video at a time. And today we have somebody who has come all the way from America but has Indian roots. He is the co-founder of Hindu American Foundation and is also an emergency doctor. Wait, did I say all of that correctly?
Absolutely.
Welcome, Mihir Meghani, to Israel and on Moses in Israel. How are you feeling today?
I'm great. Thank you, everyone. Namaste and shalom. Revital, you have an awesome podcast. I was actually listening to today one of your videos about Mossad and India-Israel cooperation. I'm super excited to be here and talk about my trip to Israel and what I see as the future for our communities.
Okay, so let's talk about what are you doing in Israel?
It's been a lifelong dream for me to come, but I was invited by the Israeli Consulate General of the Pacific Northwest, which includes the San Francisco Silicon Valley area and the states of Oregon and Washington in the Pacific Northwest region of the United States. So I came with a delegation of 9 others from all different cultural, religious backgrounds to come and see Israel firsthand so that we could understand the culture, religions, politics, and security issues the citizens of Israel and the people who live and work here face firsthand.
So what has your image been so far about Israel and the people of Israel?
I already knew coming in that this is a civilization, and I can talk about what I mean by civilization, that is very resilient, strong, and has a lot going on. But now I've actually seen Israel firsthand as a society of tremendous diversity. In Israeli, Jewish, Indian, like you, can have tremendous success and respect, and where there are people from Ethiopia who are part and parcel of society. And there's so many different varieties of people from backgrounds across the global diaspora who came here as refugees, who are all living, working together, speaking Hebrew and other languages with different foods. And where, just like in India, 20% of the population is of a different religion, different culture, but have the equal rights of the majority community, but where there are neighbors who essentially want to annihilate this civilization and people. I've been overwhelmed by the warm welcome of people here. The food, I think I've gained at least a few kilos. So there's a very good similarity to India there. So just had a great time learning about the history, visiting museums, meeting with leaders. And I think the highlight is that this is my last day in Israel and I'm on your podcast, which I love.
Well, I'm so happy you were able to make some time for this episode. I'm sad that you're leaving because I wish you were staying for a longer duration.
Yeah.
But that means you'll be coming for the second time.
Yes,
right?
I will be back. Yes.
All right. And the Hindu American Foundation. It's very fascinating for me as an Indian Jew. I grew up in India, and I say this very proudly to all my friends, to all my Jewish friends, because a lot of their grandparents were actually Holocaust survivors.
Yeah.
And Jews all over the world have faced persecution and hate, whereas India has been an ancient civilization that has accepted Jews with open arms, and the credit goes to the Hindu community. So when we actually started to speak about the Hindu American Foundation, I understood that there was an intention why it was established in the first place. So let's talk about that. What is the vision of Hindu American Foundation?
Yeah, the Hindu American Foundation was formed so that we could serve the needs of the Hindu American community in the United States. Some of the needs have been taken up by organizations like temples, which focus on sampradaya or sect based religious education, providing a place for rituals to happen, and providing social services. And there are many groups that were focused on development in India, poverty, health, and education alleviation. But the gap that was there was for people like me, who we call the second generation, the first generation that was born in America to parents who came from India. The gap was we didn't have a voice for us in the American society, a group that could speak on behalf of us on the issues that all Americans faced, and particularly Indian and Hindu Americans. We didn't have a group that also tried to create the narratives of how Hindus in America practice the religion and speak about it in a language and idiom that our neighbors, our classmates, our coworkers could understand. And so out of that, a group of us who were very proud of our Indian and American and Hindu heritage said, let's start a group that will fill that gap. That was the Hindu American Foundation. It was founded in 2003. We were volunteers for the first 5 or 6 years, and then slowly we professionalized the group. And now we are at a budget of over $4 million, and we have 27 full-time staff serving our community's needs. And we have a wonderful, wonderful team, very dedicated, and they're much, much cooler than I am. They're almost as cool as you, Revital.
Shout out to the young people who are working at HAF. First of all, congratulations, because starting anything just from volunteering and then becoming legit is like, I think it's a big deal. So congratulations, and I really applaud you for the work that you guys are doing. So kol hakavod, like we say in Hebrew. Good job to you and your entire teams, to everybody who's listening. So, what I want to talk about is the portrayal of Hindus and Hinduism in the media. I know there are a lot of instances where it was inappropriately and it was not correctly represented and portrayed in the media. How are you able to combat that, and what measures do you take to ensure that this doesn't happen again?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, if I may, I'll give you 2 examples, one from the media, one from academia.
Okay.
Most of the core problem is that most of the people who have been the resources to educate the American public about India and Hinduism have not been people who have actually lived in India or been practicing a dharma traditions, which would be Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, or Sikhism. And so they're coming from either a political perspective, which would be Marxist, or they're coming from a perspective from going to a Christian theological school and looking at everything from a Christian missionary eye. In the Tampa Bay Tribune newspaper, Tampa Bay being one of the large cities in Florida, they actually had a cover story once that said, Hindus are cannibals. And in our early history at the Hindu American Foundation, in our first 5 years, our Tampa Bay, Florida supporters said, how can they write this article? The newspaper retracted it. And why did they write that? Because they were looking at the Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom movie and saying that this is a part of Hinduism. And it's not. 1/3 of Hindus are totally vegetarian. We don't eat people. These are like myths and narratives that just get propagated. How do we combat that? 2 things. We got the local community organized and said that you should meet with the editors and publishers. And we wrote a formal letter to the publisher and editors and advertisers and said, this is what's wrong. These are resources on Hinduism that you can go to, professors, academics, and religious leaders. And you need to retract that story and apologize and meet with the community so it doesn't happen again. And we were very successful there. Another problem was in textbooks. In America, those similar groups are the resources on textbooks. They're not authentic practicing Hindus. And so we're working to change that. But again, in our first 5 years of our existence, right around 2005, we identified a textbook that basically said that other religions treat women with respect, and they don't have anything more written. But for Hinduism, they said Hindus consider women inferior. There's no mention about how women wrote the ancient scriptures that we call the Vedas. There's no mention about how they're modern day saints like Mata Amrutanandamayi, who's a woman. There's no mention about how women have contributed in many other ways to the history of India by being fighters against invasions, like Rani of Jhansi, who fought against the British, or some of the modern day women who lead the country. or contributions of people like you, which we'd want in the future. But what I mean is there's a lot more to talk about. How about talking about how Mahatma Gandhi influenced the American civil rights movement by having a huge impact on Martin Luther King, who people who studied American history know was the leading civil rights leader in the 1960s, who is responsible for African Americans in America getting rights that they didn't have and getting their justice. So Nelson Mandela, also from South Africa, was influenced by Mahatma Gandhi. Or how the Dharma traditions believe in ahimsa, or nonviolence. And most importantly, I think for the Jewish diaspora and Israelis, is how Hinduism has brought peace to the world by believing in pluralism, not just the idea of mere tolerance, but of reveling and enjoying the idea that there's beauty in diversity. That's what pluralism is. And that's ingrained within Hinduism. So I don't feel like Revital has to become Hindu. And I don't feel like she's going to go to some bad place like hell because she's not Hindu. I feel like Revital, or many of you who are watching today, you can have a great afterlife and life in whatever path you choose, whether you're religious, not religious, atheist, you're gay, lesbian, Orthodox Jewish, a very traditional Hindu. We believe in pluralism, and any path can take you there. And that's very important for the world if we all want to live in harmony. And that's why Hindus and Jews don't threaten each other. We're not trying to convert each other or kill each other. We can have totally different visions of God, or the future life or past life, whatever. But we tolerate, and more than that, we accept each other. We're pluralistic.
But thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
It's really, sometimes when you're fighting a long battle, it feels really long and it feels lonely. So thank you for saying that. And I'm sure that a lot of Hindus and Jews who are watching would really appreciate you saying that. So thank you.
Before we continue, what if I told you that you could win a free trip to Israel just by supporting a cause? 2 round-trip flights to Israel, travel across Israel, luxury accommodations in Jerusalem, and an immersive Holy Land experience you will never forget. All for free. Give me 2 minutes and I will tell you exactly how. Let's start with facts. In Israel today, more than 1.8 million people, including 1 in 3 children, are living below the poverty line. These are Holocaust survivors and IDF reservist families who do everything they can, yet month after month, they are unable to provide for themselves. That's where Mihir Meghani comes in. They are providing immediate long-term solutions. But how? Restaurant-style soup kitchens, Meals on Wheels deliveries, free shuk markets where families shop for groceries with dignity, and holiday food packages are some of the ways Mihir Meghani is committed to restoring hope and dignity to Israel's most vulnerable populations. So enter the raffle, win a trip, see the Holy Land, and know that every single ticket is feeding a family tonight. And now, back to the show.
We'll come back to being a Hindu in America at a later stage, but you said we first established that you are related to Mahatma Gandhi. What is happening? Because this is, you're the first person who I actually met, who I'm actually meeting, who is related to Mahatma Gandhi. We all know him.
Yeah.
He's everywhere. How are you related to Mahatma Gandhi?
So we come from Gujarati families, and so our relations go back for a few hundred years. And so my parents and grandparents who've passed away, they would know all the different connections. But the one I think that people will most easily see is that my Nana, in Gujarati, that means my mother's father. So my grandfather on my mother's side, his sister, so my mother's Fui in Gujarati, so my mother's father's sister, married Ramdas Gandhi, which is Gandhiji's son. And we have several other relationships as well. And I know that today in modern times, we look at some of the political decisions of Mahatma Gandhi as maybe not being what we would want today. So I would say people overlook that. But what I'd say is what Mahatma Gandhi brought into our family was a great sense of patriotism, nationalism, and the spirit of seva, which is selfless social service. And that's what I've taken from him. On my dad's side, for all the Gujaratis who are listening today, I'm related to Jhaverchand Meghani, which is who is my dad's dad's dad. So my great-grandfather. He was a very famous Gujarati poet, freedom fighter, who was jailed by the British. So I had those values of seva and service in me. And then I know you didn't ask this question, but I'll add in, when I was 9, I read about Swami Vivekananda, one of the great saints of India. I read about Mahatma Gandhi, and I realized that I need to be proud about my culture and heritage, just like my Jewish classmates in America were. And then I began my journey into rediscovering discovering the deeper aspects of my Indian and Hindu heritage, which led me eventually into activism.
Okay, now thank you for giving us context, because now I see where that passion and that fire comes from. So thank you for sharing that with us. Let's talk about you for a second. You're second generation Hindu Indian American man, born in America.
Mm-hmm.
Do you visit India very often?
I do. And, I think this will be a good place for me to also mention that I have a very supportive wife as well, who's born in India, who's from Mumbai. And so I regularly visited India in the past, maybe once every year or two. But since I got married 18 years ago to Tanvi Javeri Meghani, who's from Pedder Road area, those of you from Mumbai, my parents are from Ghatkopar, but Tanvi has family in Mumbai. And so now I go twice a year. We visit her parents and also my parents who retired into Bhavnagar in Gujarat, Bhavnagar, Gujarat. And, I also took November, December of 2025 and January 26 off with my wife, and we traveled all over India. So now we're going to make it a point every year, not just to visit family, but we're going to travel around India because Prime Minister Modi has said, spend your tourist dollars in India. But I also want to bring my wife to Israel, so we'll probably do that at some point too.
Oh, so many things to do. Wait, do you speak fluent Gujarati?
I speak fluent Gujarati, but my official grade level for Gujarati would be 3rd grade, but I spoke it at home growing up. But then after 7th grade, I went to India. I went alone without my parents. I spent the summer in Bhavnagar, and all my grandparents were alive at that time. And we hired a tutor who taught me how to read and write Gujarati, which I was able to do in a few weeks. I learned a little bit of harmonium. And so I love to speak in Gujarati. I can read and write 3rd grade level Gujarati. And my Hindi is like a filmy style of Hindi, by the way.
Before we move on, let me share a quick insight. All of you have been watching this channel, but 80% of you have not subscribed to this channel. Only with your support, I'm able to grow, invite better guests, and create an impact in the India-Israel space. So please go ahead, click that subscribe button and help this channel grow. You can also support this channel on Ko-fi. With great content comes great responsibility and great expense. So every little bit helps. And now, back to the show. You know what? It doesn't matter what the level of the language is. The fact that your parents ensured that they taught you the language is very important. And also, like, later on, you try to keep in touch with it, because a lot of people here, and I see that everywhere, immigrants and then kids of immigrants, somewhere down the line, they lose their heritage. And I think language is very important.
I absolutely thank my parents. My mother's name is Jyoti. My father's name is Abul, which there's a story behind that name, maybe for another podcast.
What's his name?
My father's name is Abul Meghani, because my grandfather on my dad's side, my dad's father, was a very, like, you could say, ideologically very utopian, Gandhian, socialist, like almost Marxist. And he's like, I want to name myself after Abul Kalam Azad, who was a freedom fighter and one of the early leaders of India.
Okay.
And so my dad's name was Abul, although they're from a Jain family.
Oh, I see.
But my parents were always like very supportive of my involvement in cultural activities and things like that. Even though they were not as involved, they always supported me from my young days. Even when I spent money like crazy, starting the Hindu Students' Council in 1990, which is a student group there, I owe a lot of my background to them.
I think it's so important. Parents are parents, but the fact that they were able to guide you and like make sure, even if you were not born on Indian soil, you're still very Indian in a lot of ways. I think it's very important. But let's talk about your mom and dad for a second. You said that they chose to move back to India. And why is that?
They left India in the late 1960s. They came to the U.S. through the Middle East. Their goal was to have a financial future, which they felt like they couldn't get in India, which at that time was very socialist. The economy was closed. There's a lot more corruption. But now, after living in the United States for like 60 plus years, they realized that they could have a very nice life in India because the development that's been there, particularly under the current government, has been tremendous. As an example, next year there'll be a bullet train between Mumbai and Ahmedabad in 2 hours. But for me to go 30 miles away on a very slow local train in the San Francisco Bay Area, the hub of technology in America, on BART, the BART system, for those of you who know the San Francisco Bay Area, is a 75-minute drive. The roads in Gujarat are so good. And there's a lot of support and family there. I think our Jewish and Indian listeners should appreciate that family is very important to our communities anywhere in the world, but particularly in India and Israel. But that community is very hard to build in America. America is still a very individualistic society. We have friends, but it's just very hard when you get old to live in America. It becomes very lonely for many, many different reasons. Whereas in India, our relatives, my Fui, Anju Fui, my Kaka, we call him Go Kaka, Manjri Fui in Ahmedabad, my mom's Masi in Mumbai, they all are providing that social structure that I can't give when I'm in the hospital working. And so my parents love it there, and they want us to come and visit them all the time.
Are you the only child?
I have a brother in San Francisco, 9 years younger. He has a startup company called InstaWork.
Oh, sweet. Shout out to Mihir's brother.
Yeah.
Oh, I also have a sister who is 8.5 years younger to me. So that's
Yeah.
You're the older child.
I'm the older one. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And the thing is, my wife's family is very, very close knit. They come from a Palanpuri Jain community, and they like get together all the time to do things. And so that reminds me of the kind of family structure I see a lot of Jewish and Israeli families having. And my other connection to India still remains. My wife teaches Bombay Jam. It's Bollywood music-based fitness program. And so I was never interested in Bollywood music until I got into, until we got married. And now I watch every Bollywood movie. Not as many as you do, probably, but yeah.
But I think it's sweet that your partner was able to add another Indian element in your life. I think that sort of sweetens the relationship as well.
Yep.
So shout out to Tanvi.
Yes.
And hopefully I get to do a dance collaboration with her someday.
Yes, absolutely.
So I'm going to get you back to Jews and Hindus for a second. I talk about similarities and shared values all the time, but something that is not addressed or not spoken about a lot because it's very, very, it's difficult to talk about is a topic called swastika. We all know that there's a challenge with this specific topic. Swastika is the world's oldest sacred symbols, especially in Hinduism and for the Hindus. And it's a sign of well-being, good fortune, and the triumph of light over darkness. But for also many, many reasons. For one reason, this sacred symbol has become a symbol of hate for the Jews. And we all know why. It's because of Holocaust, because of Nazis.
Yes, exactly. The symbol that we identify with hate, violence, the Holocaust, is a misappropriated symbol that was flipped around and rotated by the Nazi regime and then incorrectly called the swastika, whereas the Nazi party called it the Hakenkreuz, but it's actually not the swastika, which is a symbol that can look similar if you don't know what you're looking at, but is totally different and has a totally different meaning.
So as a Hindu, I invite you to explain to the Jewish community, first of all, what is the difference? Or just what is swastika in Hinduism and why it should not be associated, because they're two different things, stand for two different meanings. Would you be able to?
Yeah. Swastika is an ancient symbol for all the dharma traditions. Hindus, Jains, Sikhs, Buddhists, also for the Zoroastrians, and also for some of the religions around the world, like in Native Americans. So it has a deep symbolism, which I think we can very simplify it and say it's a very positive symbol, good energy, a good fortune. I don't want to go into the deep detail about that, but clearly very different than what the Nazis used. It's also flipped around, and you'll see in your screen as well what the swastika looks like and what the Nazi symbol was. And through very poor educational research in the Western world post-World War II by academics and journalists, what the symbol of the Nazis was known by was swastika, whereas it should have been known as the Hakenkreuz, which is what the Nazis called it. Now, how are we dealing with this? Many, many Jewish leaders understand what we're talking about. They understand the difference. And groups like the American Jewish Committee, the Chief Rabbi of Israel, the organization Stand With Us, which is a global Jewish and pro-Israel advocacy group, they've all talked about this in various forums and events. We understand it's going to take time for everyone in the world, not just Hindus and Jews, to understand this difference, but also the general public. But we're doing it in a way that Hindus, in particular, who are the main users of this symbol in daily life, at our homes and on wedding invitations, we use that symbol, the swastika. But we're doing it in a way that also Jews, we're being sensitive to the Jews and Holocaust survivors, because they may take time to understand that this is one of the greatest mistakes in modern history. And through social media, through your platform, through Stand With Us, American Jewish Committee, and the Chief Rabbi's own statement when there was a major summit of Hindu and Jewish leaders, scholars in Israel over a decade ago where these terms were clarified. And I hope those of you who are interested in this topic will look at these resources and help spread the correct understanding of these terms. We shouldn't have any misunderstanding between our communities about this symbol. And when Jews in India visit, they see the symbol. I think they do research ahead of time or during their visit, and they understand what it means. But we have a lot of people to convince.
They have a lot of resources, educational resources about this very specific topic. So I'm going to add the link in the description. Click on it, go read it, take some time because this is very important to understand. The meaning is very different from what you have been told. First of all, thank you for telling us what it means. And also from personal experience. Now, I grew up in India, so it was very normal for me. But let's say if Israelis travel to India, and even let's say Jews from the diaspora travel to India. Now, this is they're shocked. They're like, oh my gosh, people claim that there's no anti-Semitism in India. The next thing you see is a swastika drawn with a kunku on somebody's car.
Yeah.
What's happening? So this is also a cultural thing that people need to understand. So thank you for clarifying that for us. But now I want to bring back to where Jews and Hindus are now creating an alliance, which I personally think should have been done 10 years ago, but better late than never.
Yeah.
What do you think are some similarities? Because, you grew up in an Indian household, but in America, but you understand how Indian families work. So now that you're in Israel, what are some similarities that you see between Jewish and Hindu families?
I like to take this back 5,000 years and say, we're the last two ancient civilizations still standing that haven't been converted to other religions or wiped off the face of the earth and that are not footnotes in history textbooks. We're connected to our ancient land, and we have connections with the mountains, the rivers, the seas, our religious leaders. And most other cultures can't say that they have that continuity because they've changed their religion, their spirituality, or they've been displaced from their lands. So we start there. But then we fast forward over the course of 5,000 years, and we faced challenges. Jews were dispersed. Similarly, if you look at Hindu civilization, we used to stretch from Afghanistan all the way to Southeast Asia, and what remains today is Nepal and India, which are Hindu states, and then Sri Lanka, which is Hindu and Buddhist, which is a Dharma tradition. But Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Indonesia, for most of those people are now following different cultures and relations. And Indonesia does pride itself in its Hindu heritage, but in Pakistan and Bangladesh, most of that connectivity has been lost. So in modern times now, the way I see it, growing up in a conservative, traditional Jewish neighborhood of Southfield, Michigan, is that our families are very important in our lifestyle. Our mothers are really important. My Jewish mothers wanted their kids to be doctors and lawyers, and so did mine. But now the modern Jewish mothers in America want their kids to go into tech. And so that's what my brother got into. Now he was 9 years younger, so he was allowed to go into there and encouraged. But we pride ourselves in our countries, India and Israel, being democracies. They're the only two countries in the span of 1947, 1948 through modern times that have been democracies that provided rights for everyone. Both countries have 15 to 20% Muslim population, where people from many different ethnic backgrounds have been leaders in the military, in government, in arts, in acting, in the culture, and in the nation. So even though we have respectively Jewish and Hindu majorities, it's a place where anybody can thrive and succeed. We're faced by countries that really want us. They are not necessarily wanting democracies. And it's very clear that there are a segment of people in the countries and communities around us that want to annihilate the Jewish people and the Hindu, Sikh, Jain, Buddhist populations in these countries, and along with other communities in Israel, like the Druze, the Assyrians, the Ahmadiyas, and others. So we have that kind of common 5,000-year and modern history.
Wow. So, but now let's talk about your 7-day trip.
Yes.
What are some observations you felt like, I wasn't expecting to see this in Israel?
Yeah, I'd say, well, a couple of things were. One, Israel is a small country. Like when I go to Mumbai, and if I'm going from my wife's house on Pedder Road to Ghatkopar, or I'm going to Juhu Scheme, and my wife says, by the way, Parla Juhu Scheme is not Mumbai, it's a suburb. But that distance, that time I travel, I can traverse Israel in that much time. It's so small, like going from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv, an hour. I'm like, oh, wow. The second is I didn't realize how diverse Israel really was. Like in Jerusalem, I felt like, oh my gosh, everybody's conservative and Orthodox. And I come to Tel Aviv and I feel like I'm in a modern city. I could be in Mumbai. I could be in San Francisco or New York City. So it's amazing how everyone's staying together. We've had so many discussions with Arabs, Muslims, Druze. It wasn't just Jews or Zionists. And so I really appreciate that diversity of people and culture and foods and just the lifestyles here. And I think that what's amazing about this trip is that while there's a war going on, while there's a threat of missiles like raining down and destroying Israel, where one nuclear missile from Iran could wipe out like 50% of the global Jewish population, people still go about their lives. Last night, in the hotel we're staying at, and the streets nearby, that people were partying. And right now, I know the people I've met on this trip, they're preparing, in the afternoon, they'll be preparing for Shabbat. And many of the more observant people will turn off their devices and other things. So it's just amazing how life goes on, how the Jewish people and the people of Israel of all backgrounds have a resilience to them. And, they're not living in constant fear, but they live in a reality where they know what can happen, but they move on with their lives in a very productive way. I also think it's important for everyone to understand that the narratives right now that are in many countries, including the United States where I live, are funded and supported by similar ideologies. So the narratives are that India and Israel are fascist states where the extreme left and sometimes the extreme right in American society is saying that these countries are led by Nazi regimes, that Modi, Netanyahu, Trump are all like Hitler, that Israel is settled by colonial settlers who don't belong there, similar to India and Kashmir, and that we're suppressing minorities, that there's a genocide of Muslims in India and Israel, and that anybody who's giving an alternative viewpoint is like a Hindu nationalist or fundamentalist or a Jewish Zionist, and how terms like Hindutva and Zionism are now weaponized against us. And we could talk about this in its own podcast, but I think for people who are listening today, they should understand that a lot of this ideology is coming from funding from Iran, Turkey, Pakistan, and Qatar, who are supporting academics who push this forward and supporting journalists. And I'm very proud to say that there are organizations in India, the US, and Israel now who are pushing back on that and trying to change these narratives, working in a very strategic way to see where the funding is coming from. And I think we'll have great success because we're working together. And I'm glad that the Hindu American Foundation, which I'm on the board of directors of, is working alongside these institutions.
I think that is something that I had to learn as an Indian, because I'm not saying like India didn't go through war, just like the part that I lived in, we didn't really face that kind of conflict. So moving to Israel and we've been through multiple wars at this time. So sometimes when people talk about the war, and I'm like, which one are you talking about? It's to also like the ability to switch on and switch off your war brain is something that I had to train myself, because you never know. The next thing we know is running to the bomb shelters. But, life must go on. Which brings us to the last segment of this episode. We are towards the end of this episode, and I always ask my guests to give a very special message to my audiences. Our audiences are from India, Indians living in the diaspora, Israelis, Jews living in the diaspora, and fans of India and Israel. So what's your message?
I think that all of us need to realize that all of us today, whether we're Hindus, Jews, or if there's, Sikhs, Jains, Muslims, Parsis, whoever's listening, that we're all here because of the sacrifice of our ancestors. So particularly the Jewish audience, I'd say, just remember that over 5,000 years that people have died so that you could be here today and practice your life the way you want, whether you're religious or conservative or secular. It's not just people who died in the Holocaust. And for people in India, realize there were kings and warriors and others who defended, so you could practice your life the way you want today, so that you can go to the cafe, you can watch Bollywood films, or you can go to the beach in Tel Aviv. So let's just remember and respect that heritage and honor that we have. It goes beyond our parents and families and all. It all goes back many, many generations. The second thing I'd say is that if something happens to the Jewish or Hindu civilization, the world will become very bipolar. It'll become a Christian and Muslim world. And I think that that's something scary, because there's a large segment in both communities who believe that everyone should be in their own path. And I'm not saying that's most, not making a judgment. It's a reality, but we don't face that from Jews and Hindus, because we can live with other people. We don't have a theology that everyone has to convert. And I think that's very important for us to realize. So we do need to support each other and stand with each other, much like Israel is facing a proxy war from Iran, and terrorist groups who are like Hamas and Hezbollah, who have been attacking Israel for decades. India, of course, is facing the same from Pakistan-supported proxies like Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed, and their threats from groups like ISIS and the Taliban more broadly. So we need to understand that in India, one nuclear bomb on our country won't wipe out half the population, but one nuclear bomb on Israel will. And so it's a very different security situation. So I think we need to keep the collaboration between countries alive. We need to strengthen democracy, and we need to make sure that minority voices who stand with democracy, who stand for pluralism, those liberal Muslims are also supported, because we'll have to get those changes in our neighboring communities and countries to have a thriving peace in this corridor now that that's come up between India and Israel.
Wow, thank you for your words of wisdom. I was so focused on what you were saying. So thank you for sharing, because you come with a very different perspective as an Indian American, which I feel like I sometimes don't get. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to add Mihir's social media handles in the description. Go say hi. He's extremely friendly. And also, if you want to have him as a guest, I think he's a fantastic speaker. This is your proof. And I'm also going to add the link of Hindu American Foundation and a few specific links about resources that you would love to go and explore. Mihir Meghani, thank you so much for your time. And this was a great episode. I'm hoping to see you and Tanvi back in Israel, or hopefully me in America. Who knows? So thank you once again.
Thank you. Namaste. Jai Hind. Bharat Mata ki Jai.
Bharat
Thank
Mata
you.
ki Jai.
And I'm Israel Khai.
Yes. Jai Hind. I'm Israel Khai. In the meantime, stay safe, watch the right content, and I'll see you next time.